Welcome back to Network Africa. Pope Francis has arrived on the Greek island of Lesbos, to turn the world's attention to the front line of Europe's migrant crisis, which has claimed hundreds of lives in the past year. Now, Pope Francis, leader of the world's 1.2 billion Roman Catholics, was scheduled to spend about 6 hours on the small Aegean island. Based on his schedule, he was to meet 250 refugees and have lunch with about 8 of them.
Pope Francis arrived on the Greek island of Lesbos on Saturday, turning the world's attention to the front line of Europe's migrant crisis, which has claimed hundreds of lives in the past year. Francis, leader of the world's 1.2 billion Roman Catholics, was scheduled to spend about 6 hours on the small Aegean island. Based on his schedule, he was to meet 250 refugees and have lunch with 8 of them. Hundreds of people have died making the short but precarious crossing from Turkey to Lesbos shores in inflatable dinghies in the past year, and the island is full of unmarked graves.
This is a trip that is a bit different from the others. On the apostolic trips, we do many things. We see people speak. There is joy in the meeting. This is a trip marked by sadness. This is important. It is a sad trip. We are going to encounter the worst humanitarian catastrophe since World War II. We will see many people who are suffering, who don't know where to go, who had to flee. We are also going to a cemetery, the sea. Many people have drowned. I say this not to be bitter, but so that your work today may express the feelings with which I am undertaking this journey.
With Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, leader of the world's Orthodox Christians, and Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras, Francis will visit Moria, a sprawling fence complex holding more than 3,000 refugees. Greek State TV reported Francis was planning to take 10 refugees back with him to the Vatican, 8 of them Syrians. 8 organizations have described conditions at Moria, a disused army camp, as appalling. Journalists have no access to the facility on the hillside just outside Lesbos' main town of Mytilene, but 8 workers said walls were whitewashed. Several dozen migrants at the overcrowded facility were transferred to another camp, which the Pope will not visit. 8 organizations say queues for food are long, and people often wait for an hour or more. Saturday's encounter with refugees would be no frills, and the religious leaders would eat the same food as everyone else at the camp.
Well, joining us now to talk more about the Pope's visit to Greece is the VOA's Peter Henlin, VOA correspondent, is joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
It's my pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Right. Well, what effect do you think this visit by the Pope will have on the migrant crisis in Europe?
Well, the Pope is an opinion leader. People look to the Pope for cues. They look to him to try to understand why people feel the way they feel. The Pope is coming to Greece, to the island of Lesbos. He went there to send a message to Europeans that this is a crisis they must deal with in a humanitarian way. On the other hand, of course, critics of the Pope will see it as a message to the Europeans that they must be more kind. It's a double-edged sword that the Pope is wielding here. The Pope is a pastor. He's interested, and genuinely interested. The world knows, the people of Europe know, he's genuinely interested in the poorest of the poor. He has a great reputation for that. Not every Pope has fostered that reputation, but this is a man who comes from humble roots, and his words and his actions are being watched very carefully. And his message to Europeans is they have to give. They have to accept that These people are desperate. These people coming from Syria are desperate, and they need the Europeans' help, and only the Europeans can help. So, what effect will it have? I think the people of Europe are going to look twice at themselves. They've been looking at the political machinations, and many Europeans feel threatened. But when they look right at the humanitarian crisis that's facing the Syrians and the entire region, I think after watching the Pope and seeing his message of humility and humanitarian concern, it will make a difference in the attitude, what many people and the Pope calls the Christian attitude toward welcoming these Muslim refugees.
But will the Pope's visit not be taken as a protest, do you think, against the returning of migrants?
Well, no question about it. Many people see it as a protest, despite the Pope's protestations that it's only humanitarian. But certainly there is an implied criticism of the deportations, sending people back to Turkey. The Pope, again, is not a political leader. He is a spiritual, not a temporal leader. He can't make policy. He can't tell politicians what they should do or think. But implicit is a very, very strong criticism of the recent deal on deportations between the EU and Turkey.
On Saturday, he took back about 12 Muslims. Do you think it might have a negative effect in the future, being that he's the leader of a Christian movement, so to speak?
I think quite the opposite. I think it'll have a very positive long-term effect. There are many Muslims who think as they come across, they won't be welcomed because they're Muslims. And the Pope is sending a powerful message. He's taking a symbolic 12, many of them children, but some of the poorest, and he is going to see they are cared for. This Pope is the kind of guy who, in his previous incarnation, before he was the Pope, as a priest, as a bishop, he always cared for the poor. And he has a chance, and I don't think he's going to miss this chance, to show the world that the Vatican, the Catholic Church, and Christianity in general is welcoming to refugees, no matter what their religion.
You started by saying that the Pope is quite an influential person, which we do know he is. But do you think his overall visit will, dissuade or persuade the governments involved in this migrant crisis to take whichever steps, positive or negative, in this regard?
No, I don't. That's a difficult question. Probably not. The governments of these countries involved are listening to those in their populations who are frightened, who are acting out of fear of what they see as an invasion is going to do to their sometimes homogeneous populations, and how this is going to change their countries. A lot of them don't have any idea, and there is that fear of the unknown. But he is the symbolic leader, and his actions do speak very loudly.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on Network Africa. The VOA correspondent Peter Hinlin speaking to us there. Moving on to other stories now. Olympic and Paralympic gold medalist Oscar Pistorius will face sentencing in June following his conviction for murdering his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp, on Valentine's Day in 2013. Now, disgraced Olympic and Paralympic gold medalist will face that sentencing. He is known as the Blade Runner for the carbon fiber prosthetic blades he's used to race. He faces a minimum of 15 years in jail. The Supreme Court in December upgraded the 29-year-old Paralympian sentence to an appeal to murder from culpable homicide. South Africa's equivalent of manslaughter, for which he had received a 5-year sentence. In March, the Constitutional Court, the country's top court, rejected Pistorius' right to appeal against his convictions for the murder.
Your matter is postponed to the 13th of June 2016, and it will be heard until the 17th of June 2016. Do you understand? Do you understand? Yes. Right. Anything? Anything? Thank you. Court adjourns.
Coming up on Network Africa. Well, food enthusiasts head to Maryland Park in Cairo for the country's annual Cairo Bites Food Festival. That's in a moment. Do stay with us.